did that for a lot.
Led by Senator Schumer, have been fully willing to come to the table, help in any way we can, knocking down the doors of your Republican counterparts? Because, you know, we just had a Republican senator on yesterday who pointed to a Politico report saying Senator Schumer was ordering, you know, fellow Democratic senators not to engage right now.
Well, clearly the debate was happening internally within the Republican caucus. It was the same thing that happened in the House, and I think that was happening in the Senate. And, you know, in the last week or so, your network, other networks were putting up on the screen the name of the Republican senators who weren't supporting the bill. It was 2, then it was 3, then it was 4, it was 5. So their debate was happening internally, and I think it's appropriate for the opposition party to take a step back and say, hey, you got to get your ducks in an order before you come to us. Now that things look like they have fallen apart, Senator Schumer did appropriately, I think, offered to be a part of the solution here, and Democrats need to try to be a part of the solution.
You know, it strikes me that you're praising the Democratic leader in the Senate. You're saying you love what Senator Schumer did here, and of course you've been very critical of your own Democratic leadership in the House overall, of Nancy Pelosi. You want the entire House Democratic leadership to quit. So it struck me as interesting that you praised Chuck Schumer. Do you think he's a better leader for Democrats in the Senate than Nancy Pelosi is for Democrats in the House?
Well, you know, I'm not going to get into the internal family squabbles. I think I've been pretty clear since November of exactly where I stand with what we need to do with leadership in the House. There's no need for me to beat that dead horse. I was just making a point watching Senator Schumer operate here in the last 24 to 48 hours. I thought what he did was appropriate because that's what the American people want us to do. Democrats and Republicans sit down, and he made a very bold offer. Let's go to the Blair House with all of us and sit down and try to find where the common ground is. And I'm highlighting that not to in any way show some contrast with House leadership. Clearly the debate now is happening in the Senate, and I think what Senator Schumer did was really good, and I'm proud of him, and I think we need to continue to go down that road.
All right, so you said on this network to our friend Don Lemon that in some parts of the country you believe that Nancy Pelosi is more toxic than Donald Trump. Isn't that a risky play that could just fracture your party more?
Well, it happens to be true, and again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I would guarantee you if you went down and did polling in some districts in this country that's the result you would get. And it's, you know, it's not entirely surprising that a Democrat wouldn't be as popular, but I'm just making the point that, you know, I think, you know, we need to move on. But I've said that. I don't really want to keep getting into it because I'm not making any new points. And but the reality of it is we've got to figure out how to win elections. I think, you know, people are relying on us. There's many people in the country that rely on the Democratic Party. Healthcare is a huge economic issue for so many families. They count on us, and we've got to be responsible and get ourselves in the positions of power. This is not a fight just to have a fight. This is not, you know, I am Irish, and there's that old Irish saying, is this a private fight or can anyone get into it? You know, I'm not here to just have a scrap. I'm here to say we need to be in power because when you're in power, you can do things, and you can help the people that you represent, and I want us to be in that position.
Congressman Tim Ryan, we're out of time. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
The health care bill, a tough sell, as you're seeing for these Republican senators right now. Can they sell it when they go home over the July 4th recess? One new poll says 12% of Americans, only 12% of Americans support it. Can they get their constituents on board? But first, 15 versions, more than 1 billion users, and $100 billion in revenue.
Yeah, happy birthday to the iPhone. It's turning 10. You know, soon it will grow a mustache, then we'll really get into some changes here. CNN's chief business correspondent, Christine Roman's here before the
Start listening to rock and roll.
I know, that rock and roll music is so loud.
I knew you when you were just a little chap. I know the iPhone is 10 years old, and it's sort of to mark this anniversary. We went at CNN Money, and we talked to the people who designed it, the engineers. And frankly, when you talk to the folks who had their hands on this thing, creating this thing, it almost didn't happen.
When you make a new laptop, you make a new desktop, whatever, you start with a thing that works. You change the screen, maybe add a new little feature here and there, but that's it. You're done. iPhone was brand new from the chip up. We had to write everything from scratch. We hit problems in every layer of every stack. It was a nightmare. And we almost actually didn't ship a couple of times.
It was a nightmare, but a high-margin nightmare, and it's been a really important product for Apple. But really, since the moment this was born, the iPhone, there have been competitors. And I can tell you that the number one smartphone is the Android, of course. So right away, there were competitors trying to get a bite of that apple, and they have. Look at that smartphone market share. Yeah, it's yeah, I have a career in maybe communication someday. Android, 61% of the market. Remember the BlackBerry? 10 years ago, I was addicted to my BlackBerry. Weren't you?
I do remember
Think
that.
of that.
You used the BlackBerry in high school 10 years ago.
Exactly, exactly. As for the market today, guys, I'm going to really be closely watching the banking stocks. They're up in the pre-market. They had a very good day yesterday. They sailed through their stress tests. You know, regulations require that they have the post-financial crisis regulations that the Trump administration wants to roll back, require them to go through these stress tests. They did very, very well. They will be allowed to give money back to their shareholders to buy back stocks. Some of these stocks are at record highs, very good profits.
Pretty good profit despite those regulations.
Yeah,
that
banking industry is making a lot of money
about.
and lending more, despite the worries about that.
Christine Romans, thanks so much for being with us. We'll be right back. On New Year's Eve and insisted on joining me. She was bleeding badly from a facelift. I said no. All right, joining us now, CNN political analysts April Ryan, Matt Lewis, and David Drucker. Thanks all for being with us. Look, at the risk of getting involved in the president's bizarre media criticism here, what he says here, April, and the way he says it is something that no other president would say. No other president would be let off the hook for saying it the way he said it. I don't know how it benefits the United States of America, but can I get your reaction?
John, I've covered 4 presidents now. This one is very unique in his language and how he communicates with the American public. This is no different. But, you know, when you think of being presidential, you think of being above the fray and not getting involved in I guess, gutter fights or what have you. This is very interesting. We see that he's letting out secrets or letting out what's happened in his life and throwing people under the bus at that. So it's very different. But you know, Sean Spicer, White House press secretary, did say just a few weeks ago these tweets are official from the president. So this is his official word.
Okay. So the official statement from the President of the United States this morning is a statement that objectifies women, and Matt Lewis, that is a direct attack on a woman's appearance, not to mention using words like crazy and psycho to describe these people. Your take?
Yeah, I think that this does several things. It's a window into his soul, and I think that on one hand, you're right. I think that this just confirms or reinforces perceptions about how he thinks about women, how he treats women. I was defending him on CNN last night for complimenting an Irish journalist on her smile, and some people thought, well, what he said was sexist. It was inappropriate for him to do that. Well, this morning, I think this just reinforces some not terribly pleasant, the way that he treats women. The other thing is obviously the media. He has made it a concerted effort to try to diminish and attack the media, specifically his critics, which Morning Joe has now become. And then lastly, I think this is a reflection of a coarsened culture, of a cultural degradation. I mean, the fact that we have a president who talks this way and that the public isn't more outraged, and that his supporters, ostensibly people who are supposed to be conservative, applaud that is quite telling about just as much about us as it is about him.
You know, David Drucker, for a long time, during the campaign, there was the debate, does this help him? Does it hurt him? Is this the one that finally went too far? Well, maybe that's the wrong framework here. It's not about whether or not it helps or hurts him. It's about whether or not it is good or bad for the United States of America.
Right,
and he is the President of the United States of America.
It's different than campaigning. That was, does it help him or hurt him? Now he is President. How can this do anything but hurt America? David.
Well, look, I mean, I think part of the issue here is that, you know, for Republicans, which is the only, look, he's a Republican, and so for any of this to have any impact on him politically in a negative sense, there would have to be a backlash from Republican voters, which would cause Republicans on Capitol Hill to finally try and ask him to put the brakes on this. But it's been built into the price of admission for President Trump, and we've heard worse from him, and he still won the presidency as voters made a choice that between his opponent and him, they preferred him. And whenever you have a president win election doing whatever it is they did, they always figure that it worked, and so they're going to keep doing what works until it's proven that it doesn't work. Does it help him govern? No. Does it help him work with Democrats at some point? No. But I don't think that what we've seen from him indicates that that's really what he's interested in doing. I don't think that, given the tribal nature of our politics, that's what either of the parties are interested in doing. Over the long term, it probably isn't healthy for the country, but I think right now that's not what most people are that concerned about, in terms of they are making different political calculations. And one thing that it does is, from the president's point of view, continues to keep the focus on the media and continues to set him apart from his adversaries, and that allows him, in his mind, and I think there's some proof to this, to cast doubt on any critical media coverage that is out there, because if people doubt the critical media coverage, they won't believe anything critical about him, and as long as he does that, he holds his base and he holds his party.
Let's, we have some reaction just in right now from Senator John McCain, who is a Republican. We should know. You were talking about...
It's from
Meghan McCain. I'm sorry, I said John McCain. It's from Meghan McCain, the daughter of John McCain. I didn't quite hear that right. Let's put it up on the screen right now, if we have it. I do not think making fun of a woman's looks is acceptable. I get it every day of my life. I think that tweet is cruel and unpresidential. April Ryan.
Wearing my reporter hat, you know, it's interesting to watch the back and forth, but you have to remember this president received a large number of votes from women. And, you know, I guess the signs were there that these kinds of things could happen. We saw the fight with the president, or then candidate Trump, with Rosie O'Donnell and others, and Carly Fiorina, you know, on that stage talking about her looks. So this president, this goes to what people are saying. You know, some of his critics are saying the president is thin-skinned. Well, you know, for him to tweet out about Mika's looks and talk about Joe, that goes to the point that this president, whenever he gets upset, he goes and goes for the jugular. Attacking a woman is wrong, but also at the same time, in my mind, I can already see how the White House is trying to spin this to justify the president's tweets this morning, saying that they attacked him, so he went on attack. I can see that right now.
You know, I remember a little over a year ago sitting down with Ivanka Trump for this interview, and she was talking about the book she was writing about working women, and we talked a lot about women and this president, and she told me he will be a great president for women. Well, Meghan McCain also tweeted this directly to Ivanka Trump this morning. Can we pull that up? What does Ivanka... We don't have it ready, but she tweeted, Meghan McCain, what does Ivanka think of this? Matt Lewis, Ivanka Trump has put herself as a very important person in this administration, very close to the president, who has written extensively about women, spoken about her father as a great president for women. Does she have a responsibility now, in light of this, to come out? What should she say?
Well, she's in a tough spot, but I do think that that she is somewhat, she can't hide from this. I think that there were people who were reluctant to support Donald Trump, but his daughter provided a bit of cover. People said, look, he raised this very, you know, successful and eloquent and, you know, composed daughter. He must have done something right, and she's vouching for him. She's saying that, look, he's got this, you know, this gruff exterior. Sometimes he says things he doesn't really mean, but he's actually a good guy deep down. So she vouched for him. She kind of co-signed for him. And I think that because of that, because she put her credibility on the line, it's now fair to hold her accountable to a certain degree. I mean, for the things that he does and says. And you and I, we know no matter how this presidency ends, Ivanka Trump is going to try to go forward and to brand herself as this, you know, liberal who is a feminist, and that's part of her business model. And I think that we should call that into question when that happens, because she has empowered, I think, and enabled some of this presidency, some of the things that he said about women.
All right, guys, April Ryan, Matt Lewis, David Drucker. Sorry to spring this on you at the last minute. I think we wanted to talk about...
It is not the segment we had planned, but we think it's that important.
Well, we wanted to talk about healthcare. Maybe that was the plan, to talk about something other than healthcare. A distraction here, but I will say this, had anyone else written this, any other president, any other politician, we would have ignored it, so you simply can't ignore it for this president. All right, the House of Representatives set to vote on bills that could deal with the president
of criminal aliens. They're going to be gone fast.
For this Mexican woman, the president's rhetoric is cause for alarm. Undocumented, she has lived in the United States for 15 years.
I'm really scared, and I say, oh, I have to do something.
Do something, not just for her, but for her husband and 2 teenage daughters. This daughter was just 2 years old when she came to the States. She barely remembers the country of her birth and feels like any other American teen, but she worries about her parents.
It's just that tiny thought in the back of my head that, they might get deported. They might be gone, and then what will I do then? What will me and my sister do then?
To help families like this one, Sacramento reaffirmed its status as a sanctuary city.
We made it clear we are in conformance with the Constitution and current federal public law, but also to protect our current immigrants. Nearly 20% of our region here is undocumented, and that 20% contribute about $60 million to our general fund in Sacramento County alone.
The City Council also unanimously voted in favor of setting aside $300,000 of its general funds to help pay for the education and legal defense of its undocumented residents. The money will fund the Sacramento Family Unity Education and Legal Network for Immigrants, or FUEL, which will pool the resources of community groups, law schools, and local immigration attorneys.
We need to have a rapid response so we can help people who may be separated from their families. Number 2, we need to educate people about their constitutional rights. The third component is to train lawyers.
With the help of California's capital city, the mother and her family applied in January for a U visa, reserved for undocumented applicants who are victims of a crime. The daughters are now permitted to be here under the federal government's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, or DACA. The family wants nothing more than to become citizens.
My family, I think, is the good family, and I don't think so. I do nothing wrong for, for the country.
While sanctuary cities are working to protect their residents, Attorney General Jeff Sessions says they undermine the nation's security.
When cities and states refuse to help enforce immigration laws, our nation is less safe.
Do you think because of that, the Trump administration may target California and cities like Sacramento to make an example of them?
When it comes to both Attorney General Sessions.
Illinois, Yingying Zhang was last seen on June 9th. This week, the FBI announced it found her car, that it was seen on video, the last car that she got into.
Yeah, her disappearance has put an entire community on edge. CNN correspondent Kaylee Hartung has all the details for us. Kaylee.
John Poppy, Yingying Zhang's disappearance now being investigated as a kidnapping by the FBI. This story has shook the community here at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign campus, and it's resonated in China as there are more than 300,000 Chinese students and scholars currently studying in America, the largest population of them here on this campus, 5,600 currently enrolled. Now, Zhang last seen nearly 3 weeks ago as she got into a black Saturn hatchback on the north end of this campus. The first big break in this case coming as the FBI have located that black Saturn, though they won't tell us where they found it or who it belonged to. The FBI very tight-lipped as this investigation is ongoing, but we do know with the help of video surveillance cameras that there was a white male driving the car that day. There were reports of that car driving around that area of campus before coming into contact with Zhang. And Zhang, a 26-year-old, had only been on this campus for about 6 weeks before she went missing. The concern very heightened right now. John and Poppy will talk with her father and boyfriend who have traveled here from China as the search continues.
All right, Kaylee Hartung, keep us updated on that. Thank you so much. Happening now, an astounding back and forth with the President of the United States, with a representative of a major company just saying, never imagined a day when I would think to myself, it is beneath my...
You said this week are going to go into effect. Now, the big question is just who from those 6 Muslim-majority countries will be allowed to come into the United States. Per the Supreme Court ruling, that means people with a bona fide relationship with a person or an entity here. So green card holders, current visa holders, if you're employed here or a student, you're good. But the real question is, what constitutes a bona fide personal relationship? The criteria hasn't been posted publicly yet, but CNN obtained a State Department document that was sent to U.S. embassies and consulates last night. According to the administration, a parent, a spouse, a child or stepchild, a son or daughter-in-law or a sibling, those are considered bona fide relationships. Extended family members, they don't count. Notably, that includes grandparents and fiancés. Now, if someone from one of those 6 countries cannot prove that they qualify, they'll be banned for 90 days. If that person is a refugee without a bona fide relationship, the ban is for 120 days. Now, we're not likely to see the chaos we did at the airports in January with people being detained because this is just likely going to be a legal issue. Muddying the waters even more, Secretary Kelly of Department of Homeland Security announced yesterday, John and Poppy, that they are increasing aviation restrictions, saying that new measures will include greater passenger scrutiny, additional explosive detecting canines, and enhanced screening of electronic devices.
Diane Gallagher with the reporting. We'll be watching as it is implemented. Thank you very much. We also have new developments this morning in the Senate, where Republican leadership, Mitch McConnell, is scrambling to get a new draft of the health care bill done by tomorrow, and a draft that enough people are going to get on board with.
Yeah, right now, 9 Republican senators publicly oppose parts or some of the bill. Today, we're expecting many more one-on-one conversations as well as a Republican lunch, all to try to hammer out some kind of compromise, get those no votes to yeses, of course. You have to wonder whether the president's statements will do anything to sway any of the female senators he is trying to win over. Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, are they more likely to vote for something the president supports given his statements, which we'll tell you about in a second, which seem pretty sexist. But first, what's happening on Capitol Hill? Phil Mattingly is there. Phil, what are you learning?
Well, I think the big question now is, obviously, Senate Republican leaders want to get something done, at least some type of compromise agreement hammered out before tomorrow, before everybody leaves for recess, and they're still pretty far away. Now, there has been some developments. I'm told from several people involved that they are essentially there on adding more money to the bill for opioid rehab funding. That's a key issue for people like Senator Rob Portman, Senator Shelley Moore Capito, 2 individuals of those 9 that have already come out as no votes. I'm told that they will get at least the $45 billion over 10 years that they asked for. I'm also told that there is likely going to be the inclusion of a provision to make health savings accounts more flexible, to allow people to use their HSA money to help pay down premiums. That's something conservatives want. But a key point here, those are not the silver bullets. Those are kind of tinkering at the edges. Those are things that senators who are opposed to this want, but that's not going to sway them entirely. In fact, Shelley Moore Capito said explicitly yesterday the opioid money wasn't enough. She needed more changes to the Medicaid piece of this. You talk to conservatives, they've made very clear they like what they're hearing about HSAs, but they need more on the regulatory front. And therein, guys, lies kind of essentially the point we've been discussing now for the last couple of weeks, threading the needle. How do you do it? Give a little bit to this side and a little bit to that side. Is it enough to actually bring everybody together? At this point, no. And guys, you look at kind of the surrounding circumstances here. You look at poll numbers that are in the low double digits. Look, the senators read the poll numbers. There's no question about it. You look at you mentioned some of the disagreements or maybe issues that they've had with the White House, whether or not the president actually knows the details of what's going on, whether or not he can have any kind of positive role in this process at all as they work through it. These are the outstanding questions that are surrounding what is already a very, very difficult policy debate. You're going to see a lot more one-on-one meetings today, a lot more effort to try and get there legislatively, maybe some administrative promises as well from the administration. The big question remains, how do you get to 50 votes? The reality also remains, they're not there yet, guys.
All right, Phil Mattingly with a reality check, as it were, on Capitol Hill. Thanks so much for that. Now, it's a big day, right? A big day on Capitol Hill, big day for the president.
Huge day for policy, things that change people's lives, but...
Exactly. Was the president writing about that? No. Instead, he is making deeply personal, deeply insulting statements. I want to read you what he is saying about cable news hosts right now. I heard poorly rated Morning Joe speaks badly of me, in parentheses, don't watch anymore, which I don't believe, frankly. Then how come low IQ Crazy Mika along with Psycho Joe came to Mar-a-Lago 3 nights in a row around New Year's Eve and insisted on joining me? She was bleeding badly from a facelift. I said no.
Joining us now, Maria Cardona, CNN political commentator and Democratic strategist, CNN contributor Selena Zito, Joseph Borelli, Republican councilman for the 51st District of New York City, and Brian Stelter, our senior media correspondent and host of Reliable Sources. This is objectively a statement from the highest office in the land, from the president, that objectifies women. This is a statement that is cruel. It attacks a woman's appearance. Councilman, you have been for a long time a big supporter of this president during the campaign, a defender of his. Can you defend this?
Well,
and what is your response to it?
Well, I'm not going to defend the personal nature of it, other than to say that this is certainly an indication that the war between the Trump administration and the media is certainly showing no signs of ending. I think he was telling the truth when he says he didn't watch the Morning Joe show, because if he had, there's a little bit of irony today in that Morning Joe was discussing on his program how the media had basically, he used the term willfully mistaken when he meant lying, but how the media had been essentially lying about the Trump administration for the last 18 months.
Can we just get back to, my question was about women, and I really want you to address it, because this is someone who has ran on being a powerful president, in his words, for women. His daughter, Ivanka Trump, said he will be great for women. She stands for and just wrote a book about working women. Is it okay for the president to say this about women?
Look, like I said, I'm not going to go into the personal insults. Maybe there's an inside story that we don't know about. I think this certainly didn't help. I mean, we know that this segment was slated to talk about health care, and instead of talking about health care, we're talking about these tweets. So
that's the president's fault.
Right. You're 100% right. And look, I'm not going to comment again on his particular insult, nor am I going to comment on Micah's little response.
You know, Selena Zito, hang on one second, Brian.
It's unpresidential. Why can't you just say it's unpresidential? Look, why can't you look at the president who's probably watching right now and say, knock it off?
These are the things that people said were unpresidential about the president when he was running for office, and yet here he is.
I was taught in grade school that two wrongs don't make a right. These are rivals. These are MSNBC hosts, but everyone in the media should be standing up today saying, it's inappropriate for the president.
I think everyone might want to take a bit of Morning Joe's perspective and actually acknowledge that the media has also been at war with the Trump administration by not exactly telling the truth on many stories and going into Russian hysteria for 18 months.
Hang on one second, guys. Selena Zito, I want to get your take on this yesterday, because yesterday there was a discussion about the president commenting on a woman's smile. You defended that. Is this qualitatively different today, Selena?
Absolutely. I had former President Barack Obama in 2007 said something incredibly similar to me. I think we were in New Hampshire. I wasn't offended by that. Having said that, and as someone who is regularly attacked online for my looks or my hair, or and not on the content of what I report, I find that awful. Brian's right. Two wrongs don't make a right. If you have a beef with someone, take it to that level as to what the beef is. But don't make it, personal attacks are just, they're repulsive. It's unpresidential. It's unfit for the office, and have your problems, whatever they may be, whether it's with the media, whether it's a rival, have it stay on that course, on the policy, or on the whatever the conflict may be. Certainly not on what someone looks like.
Maria Cardona, my producer, reminds me in my ear, importantly, about Ivanka Trump giving that interview just a few weeks ago to Fox and talking about what she called a level of viciousness, and the media said there's a level of viciousness that I was not expecting. He's a father of daughters. I'm the mother of a daughter. To all the parents out there, this attack on women and appearances, what is the country supposed to do with this?
I think the country should take a hard look at who they have elected as their commander-in-chief, leader of the free world, and president of the United States. I mean, the ironies are unending, Poppy, starting with Ivanka, who's, prides herself in being a defender of women, but yet she backs her father and blames everybody else for vicious attacks against him. She needs to take a look at her own house before she says anything. And then I actually feel bad for the First Lady, who supposedly wants to focus on an anti-cyberbullying program. She also needs to look inside her own house before she tries to preach to anybody else about what that should be. But here's the thing. Yes, we should all be outraged about what he said, but what makes us think that the man who in his life and in the campaign has acted like a misogynist, a sexist, a sexual predator, who has talked about women in an incredibly demeaning and objectifying way, is this really all that surprising that he would do this now, even sitting in the Oval Office? So yes, we should not normalize this. I applaud Selena for saying it the way it is. It is unacceptable, unpresidential. He should cut it out. Joseph, I wish, would get on that program too, because it is what decent human beings understand is what a decent human being should act like in the Oval Office. At the end of the day, what he proves yet again is that he is just not a decent human being.
Brian Stelter, what's NBC saying about this so far?
We do have a statement from the head of PR at the network we can put on screen. Quote, "It's a sad day for America when the president spends his time bullying, lying, and spewing petty personal attacks instead of doing his job." I do think it's worth noting, for the record, some of what Trump says is also factually inaccurate. I've been covering morning TV for a long time. I wrote a book about it. Joe and Mika, they're not psychos. They don't have low IQs. They did meet with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago. The president says he didn't. They did meet. There's photos of them together. I hate to even have to say this, but there's no bandages, there's no blood on Mika's face. So beyond how offensive it is, it's also not accurate. I wonder what Melania is going to say to the president tonight. Today, I wonder what Ivanka is going to say. I'm glad, Papa, you're making this about the gender part, among other pieces, because it does seem very gendered.
You didn't say it about Joe.
Scarborough is not. Yeah, Scarborough was the target, but it was only personal about Mika's appearance.
Meghan McCain, Senator John McCain's daughter, also works for Fox News. A conservative came out. Let's pull up what she said immediately after the president tweeted this. "I do not think making fun of a woman's look is acceptable. I get it every day of my life. I think that tweet is cruel and unpresidential." And then she went on to tweet additionally, "What does Ivanka think of this?" Councilman, do the women around the president who have spoken so much about female empowerment and respect, like Ivanka Trump and the First Lady, should they say something?
I think there probably will be some conversations based on this tweet in the White House and in the residence. And I think this is one of those times where probably the tweet would have been better served if he cut it off at a certain point. There is something to be said about the way the media treats the Trump administration behind closed doors. I've seen that firsthand, how people discuss Sean Spicer in the green room and then come on camera, and when the cameras are on, he's the devil incarnate. Well, so there is some fairness to what he said. Again, he should have cut it off.
Well, we'll take your last part of that statement. He should have cut it off right there as speaking volumes. Joseph Borelli, Brian Stelter, Maria Cardona, Selena Zito, thank you all so much. Again, we booked you to talk about health care. We booked you to talk about health care. That, in and of itself, speaks volumes, because the Republicans are trying to get this bill through.
By tomorrow, they're trying to get it done at least.
We're going to talk to one Republican congressman coming up. We're going to ask him, are the president's tweets helping get this health care bill through? Plus, South Korea's new president heading to the White House for 2 days of crucial talks with the president. The nuclear threat with North Korea casting a big shadow over that.
The first face-to-face encounter. President Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin set to meet on the sidelines of the G20 summit next week. What will President Trump say to him about the election hack?
Leaders are working this morning to try to reach a compromise on their version of a bill to replace Obamacare.
Can they get to 50 yeses by tomorrow? That's their hope before they go on recess. At least that's McConnell's hope. We will see. Joining us now is Republican Congressman Tom Reed of New York. Thank you for joining us, Congressman.
Thank you for having me on.
Before we get to health care, which was our intent to talk completely to you about today, we have to ask you for your reaction to what the president has chosen to discuss this morning. Let me put it up for you, his statement. "I heard poorly rated Morning Joe speaks badly of me, don't watch anymore. Then how come low IQ crazy Mika along with Psycho Joe came to Mar-a-Lago 3 nights in a row around New Year's Eve and insisted on joining me? She was bleeding badly from a facelift. I said no." Is that appropriate language from the President of the United States?
Well, obviously, I was just made aware of that tweet and don't know the context or the exchange, but obviously concerned about that type of language, and maybe the intent is to distract from the health care debate, but I want to be part of the debate that's impacting the American people. When it comes to health care, tax reform, that's where our conversation should be, and that's where I try to lend my voice each and every day.
You say, I'm not sure the context of the tweet matters. In this case. I mean, the White House likes to say the tweet speaks for itself there. The language is what it is there. You do say you are concerned about that. We will accept, that statement from you. Does it help pass the health care bill, hearing the president say things like that?
Well, you know, obviously, I think the more we can focus and have a debate with the White House and the American people and the Senate and the House about how we're going to fix the failing Obamacare system, how we're going to go forward as a country united, I think that's more helpful to the dialogue than this exchange in regards to this tweet and talking about those types of issues.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to health care. You have been very supportive of the House GOP health care bill, but you came out this week and you said that the Senate version, under that, 100,000 of your constituents would lose their health insurance. That's about a seventh of your entire constituency. Why?
Yeah, you know, because you see all these wild reports out there from different ideologue think tanks that are pushing an agenda. They've used that extreme number, that type of data, to try to scare folks. And it's just not the truth. The truth is we're trying to fix the system, we're trying to fix the problem, and we're trying to stand with working people and make sure they can power their future health care choices.
What I read was that you said that under the Senate version, 100,000 of your constituents would lose their health insurance. Is that not true?
Yeah, no, I was asked what reports have I seen about what would happen to people in our district, and I've seen reports that are wildly exaggerated that support numbers like that supposedly, and that's just false, and that's what I was articulating in that exchange with that reporter.
Do you think there will be people in your district who lose their health insurance if the Senate version of this bill passes?
You know, obviously I'm concerned about that. Is that a reality I have to face? Yes. But can I look at the other 700,000 people, 710,000 people that are going to be adversely impacted if we stay with the status quo? You know, I got to make these hard decisions and represent all the people we represent. We got to work towards getting towards zero. And if we can achieve zero, I'm all in. That's why I want to work with the other side to come up with solutions that are going to get to zero. But we obviously have to recognize the reality of the situation of health care.
Here's what your fellow New York Republican Congressman Peter King said last night. Watch.
I want to do it in a way that we're not hurting anyone, and if it takes us 2, 3, 4, 5 years to do it, fine. If we don't repeal all of it, hey, that's democracy.
He says, wait, slow down. This could take years, and if it doesn't happen, well, that's democracy. Is he right?
No, I think his point is very well taken, and we've always said this is the first step. Taking care of this bill is not going to remove the health care problems of America or in our districts. We got to go to the second, third step and actually get into the health care conversation. We're primarily focused on health insurance right now, and we have to have that total conversation health care, and that could take years, but we got to fix this and get it right for the American people.
All right, it could take years. Mitch McConnell wants an agreement by tomorrow. Seems like you guys are on a little bit of an opposite page on that one, but thank you.
Absolutely. No, the first step can be taken immediately. That's what we're talking about right now with the bill before the House and Senate.
This regime, and they include military action. Let's go to the Pentagon. That's where we find our Barbara Starr. And Barbara, General McMaster now says, quote, the threat is much more immediate now. Do we know what specific intelligence he's pointing to?
Well, it's interesting. We are hearing this hardening of language, and President Trump himself just a couple of days ago said that North Korea might have to be dealt with rapidly. That was President Trump's wording of this. So why are they saying this? Intelligence is indicating that the North Koreans are continuing to make progress, of course, in their ballistic missile and nuclear weapons program, but also hiding their activities better, their launch activities, their preparation activities, making it much more difficult for the U.S. to anticipate North Korea's next step. That now leading to this updating of options, including a potential military option to be ready for the president if it was to come to the point he had to make a decision about doing something. General McMaster laying some of this out in public.
The threat is much more immediate now. And so it's clear that we can't repeat the same approach, failed approach of the past. The president has directed us to not do that and to prepare a range of options, including a military option, which nobody wants to take.
A military option, and again, what you're talking about is something that the president could potentially act on very quickly if they saw a real step forward in North Korea's program. But I think it needs to always be said, this administration, like every administration, clearly hoping diplomacy, clearly hoping China pressuring North Korea will work to ratchet back their program. But it hasn't worked yet. Back to you guys.
All right, Barbara Starr at the Pentagon, thanks so much. All right, earlier this morning we learned that President Trump will meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This will be their first meeting, the first time these two men meet, we believe. It's going to happen on the sidelines of the G20 summit. That is according to the Kremlin. All right, joining us to talk about this now, former U.S. Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs and former U.S. Ambassador to both NATO and Greece, Nicholas Burns. Also with us, former CIA operative Mike Baker. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us. Ambassador, I want to start with you on the subject of Russia, because you caused quite a stir yesterday when you testified that the president, his lack of response to Russia represents a dereliction of the basic duty to defend the country. Why such strong words?
Well, because they're warranted, because there was a systematic cyber attack by the Russian government on our elections, and then that was repeated in the Dutch, French, and now German elections. And there's no doubt about it. The intelligence agencies of the United States are conclusive on that. And in response, President Trump has not investigated what happened to us back in 2016. He's not initiated any effort to build our defenses, because we have midterms coming up in 2018 and another presidential election in 2020. He has not actually worked with our European allies to have a collective response to Russia, and he's not supporting strong sanctions that the Senate, Republicans in the Senate, want to put forward towards Russia. His first duty is to defend the country. We have been assaulted by the Russians, and I found in my testimony at the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence yesterday, I think frustration with President Trump by both parties that he hasn't taken these steps. So let's hope that he does that in the coming weeks. And I think for his meeting with President Putin in Hamburg on the margins of the G20 summit, he has to raise this issue in the way that President Obama raised this issue with President Putin last November.
But you could also argue, Ambassador, that it didn't work, right? When President Obama said cut it out and instituted those sanctions and kicked those diplomats out, that, you know, that what was the impact? What would be more effective, Ambassador, for President Trump to say?
Well, I think what I believe is that President Trump has to support these sanctions. These are stronger sanctions against the Russian government over the interference in our elections, number one. Number two, he has an opportunity to try to repair his very difficult relationship with the European leaders, especially Angela Merkel. They will respond well if he says, let's work together in NATO to work on defensive measures to try to contain this Russian threat. Finally, there has to be an offensive response by the United States. Maybe it's asymmetric, but there has to be some kind of response. What I was saying yesterday, I think, does reflect a lot of opinion within the administration, of course below President Trump, but also outside the administration.
All right, Mike Baker, jump in here. Dereliction of duty. Do you think the president is guilty of that? Do you think that's too far?
I think dereliction of duty is probably, look, I'm not going to parse words or argue over words. Could the messaging be much stronger? Could it be much more aggressive coming out of the White House now? Yes. Could it have been the same with the previous administration? Yes. Look, we played Putin badly for not just this current administration, but the Obama administration, the Bush administration. We've never really taken him at his word. And what we're seeing now is a country really with a GDP of a medium-sized EU nation punching well above its weight in Putin's continued effort to try to reclaim some glory from the Soviet Union days. I disagree in a sense, with all due respect, with Ambassador Burns in terms of, we're not taking any action. Look, the government is taking action. They understand the seriousness of it. We're not getting that messaging from the White House. We're not hearing that from the White House. Right. But the intel community and others are busy and have been for some time trying to stay ahead of the cyber warfare game. When you talk about this, you're talking about years of frustration, and we have been slow in getting into the game. There's no doubt about that. And we do need to do more. I think that dereliction of duty, if we're going to use that term,
but Mike,
we can spread that back.
The ambassador is talking about the ambassador is talking about the president himself, and there is new reporting from our Dana Bash about frustration at a boiling point within high levels of the West Wing. Multiple senior administration officials telling CNN there are few signs the president is devoting his time or his attention to the ongoing election-related cyber threats from Russia. That's on the White House, is it not?
Right. Well, that is, and that's where I do agree in the sense of there could be, and there has been a problem with messaging. There could be a much stronger, tighter, disciplined message about the threat of this, and there could be more of a focus on it from the president himself. There's no doubt about that. I guess what I'm saying is that underneath that, where things actually happen, where operational activities actually occur, there are a wide range of efforts being done to try to ensure that we strengthen this. Look, we understand that the Russians were engaged in this activity during this past election. We also understand they've been doing this for a long time. So that's why I say, you know, if you're going to throw out a term like dereliction of duty, you better be willing to apply it to a lack of focus on appropriate response in cyber warfare going back for years now in the U.S.
You got 10 seconds to respond, Ambassador.
Well, I also said yesterday President Obama should have done more. What matters in our system is what the president does. What matters to Putin is what the president does. That's how international politics works at the highest